What it is, y'all, it is your old boy Pilk, and I'm coming back at you today with more Danmachi. Now, today I want to do a little bit of a deep dive into the Record Buster event. And the reason I say that is because every single week when we talk about Record Buster specifically, or every single other week technically, we talk about Record Buster, there's always somebody that comes to the stream and says like, hey, I can't break 8 million damage. I can't break, 32 million damage or whatever. These are seemingly big numbers, but the answer is, in the long run of things, they're really nothing. And this isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think it generally comes from a misunderstanding of how Record Buster works. That, and realistically, and very simply put, sometimes you simply can't beat those numbers. But I feel like most of the people that I talk to in regards to this, if you've been playing the game for like 2-3 months, you should be doing so much better. So today I want to deep dive into not just Record Buster itself, but how does Record Buster work? And I think this is going to be a very important factor in, I guess, the overall success of how people approach this event. So let's go ahead and dive in here and go more or less into how Record Buster is run and more into the mechanics of how Record Buster works and how you should approach it. And the very first thing you need to consider when you're setting up a Record Buster team is what elements do you need to take this on. In other words, if I go in here and just start a run, it'll say down here at the bottom, it's going to favor Thunder and Wind. Now, when we go into the match, obviously, each one of those is going to have a different percentage. I happen to know, I'm pretty sure, that when we go in here, Thunder is about 60% deficient, as in it's going to be like -60, whereas Wind is usually like -30. Now, I say this because Reveria is a water type, so Thunder is going to be the preferred element in that situation. You can use a Wind team, but Wind isn't going to produce as good of results. So when we finally do go into the run here, we'll talk about how we're aware of that, how we know that, but just understand that building a Thunder team in this situation is going to be better. How do we know that? We'll talk about it, but the other thing you need to consider on top of the element is the basically attack style. Is this a physical or magic preferred event? I.e., when we go in there, we see like Thunder is down 60%, Wind is down 30%, is physical down a certain percentage, is magic down a certain percentage. And each Record Buster is going to be a little bit different in that regard. So, basically when we go into our first run, preferably you'd like to have this all like laid out before you ahead of time, but most people go to the first run, the very first run of the very first day, and just go, okay, cool. What is Reveria doing? How do I handle this situation? So, when it comes to Reveria, don't you dare start this stuff. I just plugged you in, don't start. So, when my HDMI decides to troll mid-video. So, in this case, physical or magic is neutral, but you really do want to handle this on a case-to-case basis. Not every single one is going to be the same element. Not every single one is going to be physical or magic. It really just depends. Now, the third main factor when creating a team, and this is a huge, huge portion of this, is which ailment you actually need for this event. And to do that, we're actually going to go to another screen. We're going to go back out here to the main screen. We're going to go actually up to the little gear/settings icon at the top. We're going to go to news. And we're going to go down here to the Record Buster setting here. Okay? Now, right on the description, it says ranking event Record Buster April Season 2 is available. You will fight Absolute Zero Reveria. This time, she will attack with slow and stun. Now, you're not going to be able to block slow. There's nothing you could really do about it. But stun is really easy to handle. So if we go back over to the game here, okay, and I just go pick up my team. The primary way, in my opinion, the best way to handle this is with all your adventurers. If we just go into their equipment, I like, on the armor side, to use the Glorious Anklets. So every single adventurer, with the exception of adventurers that I'm sacking out, which I'm going to use the Revolving Amulet on them. I've made a whole video on just the Revolving Amulet itself. If you want to understand how the different anklets and amulets work, go check out my equipment videos. I've produced quite a few of those. They're in our 101 section on the channel. But understand that the Glorious Anklet, each one of these is going to have a basically an ailment. So I've got several stun resistance Glorious Anklets. You know, if you go over here on the side, you'll notice that this one's stun. This one is seal. There's like poison down here. So every single ailment is represented in the Glorious Anklets. So basically every single unit is going to be using a stun resistance Glorious Anklet as the armor there. That basically means that every single unit that has that equipped, case in point, this Leafia, I will tell you right out of the gate, Argonaut, Galamus, Argonaut, Gareth, Leafia, actually, funny enough, Winnie, this guy, we'll kind of talk about that when we get into the run, and Haruhime all have anti-stun anklets. There's a very good reason for that. Basically, that's just going to prevent us from getting stunned. Now, the downside to anklets, or amulets, is you have to have played Record Buster a certain number of times before you can craft them. So if you're new to the game, and you haven't run Record Buster enough times to actually be able to craft those things, you can use an assist. Now, there are several ailment resistance assists in here, but my recommendation, because you're not going to use them too terribly often, don't spec into maxing out a bunch of the 4-star ailment resistant assists, because they're kind of going to go to waste after a while. It's wasted resources. The 3-star units that there's several of them in here that actually do full-on 100% ailment resistance. It just so happens that I know that this Misha is the 3-star stun resistance assist. Now, there is one for each ailment, like I said. I don't recall all of them off the top of my head. I just don't use them as much anymore. Otherwise, it would probably be fresh information. If you want a basically overview of that, join the Discords, either my Discord, the Crude Suspension Bridge to Venezuela, or the Stardust Garden, which is another Discord we are partnered with that also is very good and has a lot of great Danmachi guides. There are guides all over both Discords that will help you determine it and tell you literally which assist will give you that effect for your ailment. So, like, probably the next one that comes up will be like Seal. We generally don't get poisoned with Record Buster, but usually Stun and Seal are the two biggies. Those are the two you want to pay the most attention to. So, know which element, in this case Thunder and Wind, it'll be different each and every time, whether it's physical or magic preferred, as in the attack style, and which ailment you are going to be affected by. Those 3 factors are going to be your biggest decision makers going in here. They're the easiest things to figure out, and that's literally going to be how you're going to design your teams. So in this case, I've got a Thunder team that is mixed physical and magic. Kind of see how we built this team here. And they're all using anti-stun equipment so that they don't get stunned. If they get stunned, you're going to hate life. So you really need, basically, to understand how it works. It doesn't seem on the surface like stun is really that big of a deal. The biggest thing stun does is it takes away your ability to do counter damage. And if you really accommodate for how much damage is done throughout the match, counter damage is probably some of the most damage you're going to do throughout. It doesn't seem like that on the surface, but remember, when Reverie is attacking, 3 and 4 times a turn. If you have good counters on your team, you're going to counter each and every one of those hits. So all your units are going to do 1, sometimes 2 hits depending. And then another 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever hits based on the counters that they're doing. It's a quick way to accrue damage. If you get stunned, you're not getting that damage. You're literally negating well over half the damage, maybe even more, that you would otherwise be accruing. So you definitely need to consider those ailments. It's very important. Now, one of the biggest things, the most insane things that really people overlook on this one is difficulty. So if I go here to start, it'll pop up this little select difficulty page. I always do difficulty 6. That's just the biggest difficulty is the hardest difficulty. I feel like the number one way a lot of people are just losing out on overall score is they're probably just running difficulty 1 or 2 because they don't want to risk losing. And I'm going to be honest here. You have 5 runs a day. You need to be pretty much... I'll go ahead and start a run here. You should be on the ragged edge and concerned at all times about basically how you're handling this situation. Now, real quick, I'll talk about what I just did there for a moment. I turned off auto battle. There is a way you could do auto battle, but if I'm entirely honest, your very first run each and every time needs to be a dry run that you do manually. If you are auto running, the most important thing you have to understand, if you have not set a skill flow, and I'll talk about skill flow at the end of the video, we will talk about that after this run is done. If you are doing an auto run at every single time, you are not buffing your team. Your units will not do their buff skills. I.e., case in point. So skill 1 here with Argo, a fast, strength, agility, and thunder attack damage 40% with all allies, physical and magic resistance 30%. He will literally not do that skill if you auto run, which means he's losing out on 80% of his damage and 60% of his defenses. Everybody's losing out on those defenses, in fact. You have to manually run your first run or set a skill flow, which, like I said, I'll talk about it at the end of the video. So I did want to talk about that because it is something that I often overlook. But a lot of people say, I auto run every single time, and I don't know why. Pardon me. I auto run every single time, and I don't know why I can't exceed 8 million damage. Well, the answer is simply, you're not letting your team buff. I don't want to manually do it. Well, then you're not going to get the damage. You're simply not going to get it if you don't either A, set a skill flow that works and is decent, but to do that, you really do have to manually run this, okay? Very simply put. So, also, before we get back on the difficulty, if I go in here, any numbers in red are numbers that have affected. So, physical and magic are down 15%, but if I go down here, you'll see that physical and magic are down 15% here. So physical and magic are both neutral up here. Sometimes you'll see units that, like I said, favor physical. They'll be like already down 20, 30%, maybe more. Or magic will be up 20, 30%, or maybe even more, or the other way around. Just whichever is the lowest number, which generally speaking is in the neutral or in the negatives, that's what you want to favor. Now I can build a combo team here because, as I said prior, since it's neutral, they're both 0. I can easily run either one, either physical or magic. Now, thunder. So you notice that wind is down 30, but thunder is down like 95. Now we have taken thunder down another 15%, but that does mean that thunder was down. I said 60. I believe that now it makes it 80%. So thunder is always going to be immensely more effective as an element. So when you're building your teams, you definitely want to make sure that you are running whatever element, in this case Thunder, is preferred for the event. And I do want to apologize here for a moment. A, I'm very stuffed up. It's allergy season. My deepest apologies. B, I still need to order a replacement USB-C cable. I actually have it on order from Amazon. It hasn't arrived yet. But this is gone tomorrow, so I really need to get this video recorded. So the screen might be a little wonky at times. So my deepest apologies for that. But so hopefully you fully understand Element, you fully understand Physical and Magic, hopefully you fully understand Ailment. Now, difficulty, as I was saying before, when I'm running this, and I actually have everything set up in my skill flow, so I'm just going to go ahead and go through this. Your units should always be basically from like maybe I'd say turn 9 or so in real, legitimate, honest to goodness danger. Your units need to be at all times in very distinct danger of getting wiped out. Why do I say that? Well, very simply put, if your units are really being, I guess, challenged, then you're going to get a better score. Basically, the higher the difficulty, the better the score. Now, if you're running difficulty 1 and your units at like turn 13 look like my units right now where they're fully healed and they've got, you know, no damage whatsoever, then you're not getting your full effect. Try like difficulty 2, difficulty 3, difficulty 4. Basically try until you just can't survive and then go back one difficulty. If you are running difficulty 1 every single time, you're only going to get a base level score. The higher the difficulty, the better your score. The two key factors, the two best factors in getting a good score. Number 1, how long did you survive? Did you survive to turn 15? Great, you're getting a maximum score. Number 2, what was your difficulty level? There's a big modifier for difficulty level. Now, obviously, you know, damage you do along the way does factor into this. But those are big modifiers on whatever you do in this run. This run here, if I'm really effective with this, could be, you know, 750 if I'm really truly effective with it. I think this far the best I've gotten is 715, but I had a few deficiencies in that run. The best runs that you can do could yield you great score. If I did that on, let's say, first difficulty 1, I'd be lucky to break 100 million. So there's a huge benefit to running higher level difficulties. If you're not getting the numbers you expect and your units aren't being challenged, consider running a harder difficulty. Can't say that enough. Now, let's talk about another factor here, okay? And that is removing the opponent removing buffs and debuffs. At the end of this turn, Reveria is going to remove all of my buffs. Basically, she's going to do a super attack here on turn 4, and she's going to remove everybody's buff. Reveria removes buffs. Revis actually removes debuffs. So, like, and she doesn't do it on turn 4, she does it on turn 6. But every single one of our Record Buster foes does something special. You just kind of have to know what that special effect is. Okay? In the case of Finn, he actually wipes them all out. Like, everything's gone at the end of turn 4. But in the case of Reveria, at the end of turn 4 here, everybody's going to have to rebuff. So everybody's going to go back and use their skill 1 to basically build themselves back up. That said, Reveria's debuffs stay in play. So I'm actually going to use Winnie's SA here to give ourselves all and single target 50%. That's the highest stat in the game. And that's going to allow me to do so much more damage from this point going forward. Also, you'll see here on turn 6, I'm going to run Gareth's SA, and that is going to debuff magic resistance down 60%. So her magic right now is minus 45%. That is, let's see. So magic resistance currently is 30%. You could basically see that go down to another 30%. It's going to go down to negative 75%. 5%. And that's really just going to allow us to hit so very much. I think is this magic resistance or is this thunder resistance? I don't recollect. We'll look at it here in a moment. But I think it's magic resistance if I'm honest. But either way, basically these debuffs are just going to allow me to do more. Now with this same team, if I was going up against Rivas, I would actually be doing Haruhime's essay early on to allow us to just get more damage as we go out. Obviously if it's Finn, you can't do any of the above. So you really have to understand the opponent that you're up against. Do they remove buffs? Do they remove debuffs? Both? None? How do I handle the situation? So that's going to be a big factor in this as well. Like I said, Reveria, she removes buffs, not debuffs, so we can debuff to our heart's content here, and every debuff will stay in play. That means that on turn 4, we will actually be able to rebuff, but we don't have to debuff, so we can save ourselves some major headache there. And we can accrue faster and more damage by doing more debuffs throughout the match. Can't always do that. It doesn't always work that way, but it helps you build a team flow. Now, I want to talk about one other thing here. So you'll see there we just took a big hit. Normally, on turns 4, 8, and 12, you want to use somebody on the team that is going to remove whatever buffs your opponent has. So in this case, Reveria, she has a 30% magic buff. Rivas gives herself some kind of physical buff. And then, of course, Finn gives himself a physical and magic buff. You really should, in most situations, have somebody on the team that is going to remove those buffs. If you do not, life is going to suck, and you're not going to be very happy. Now, why do I say that? Well, if you saw the hit I took there, imagine every single time she essays a bit harder and a bit harder and a bit harder. Now, I did hit her, and I'll kind of go over this too, with critical rate and penetration rate down. And critical rate and penetration rate are two of the biggest factors in getting essayed. Plus, you'll also notice that, remember I said all the debuffs stay in place on her. Strength and magic are both down 40%. And Argonaut will actually give everybody 30% magic buff, or 30% magic defensive buff. So really, when all that's in play, I'm going to kind of cheese this. Now, if I'm honest, this is a big gamble. It's a lot safer to throw somebody on your team that can remove magic buffs, but there's nobody on the Thunder team that does that. That's another reason why you could throw wind units on here and just get a little bit of damage out. For me, I'm kind of running more of a gamble. But neither here nor there. Everybody's going to go ahead and buff here on this turn and kind of move on. Okay? So you need to consider, what does your opponent do? Do they remove buffs? Do they remove debuffs? Thank you, Haruhime, for healing there. That's why I say, once again, your team needs to be on the ragged edge. If they're not, you're really not doing it right. The only thing that sucks here is now Gareth. Normally, I'd want him to do his special on turn 6, because when he didn't die on turn 4 like I planned, I'm going to have to do Gareth's on turn 7 instead. So I'm going to be losing a little bit of damage here. It is not a preferential run, but it's, once again, another one of those reasons I say do not run this manually at all times, just so you can accommodate for these situations. I could do an auto run, but on this turn, I'm really going to be underutilizing my units. Now, I don't like Leafia's health here. Leafia's health is in a bad place, but I'm going to essay with Gareth. So I was wrong. It's not magic resist, it's thunder resist. So the thunder resist on Reveria is going to go down from 135%. I believe currently it's 40%. It's going to go down to 155%. So everybody, not just Leafia, but everybody's going to be doing an insane amount more damage, because that thunder resist is going to be going down. So I'm going to go ahead and use his essay. I'm going to use her heal, and everybody else is going to do their main attack. Now, remember when I said all your units should kind of be on the ragged edge of dying at all times? This is what I'm talking about. I'm running a very big gamble here in the hopes that Haruhime's heals are going to work out for us. Also, Gareth has a skill that will do HP regen. But unfortunately, Leafia just died. So that means that this is not going to be an effective run, and I'm going to have to go back and try something else. It happens. That's the name of the game. But I'm just going to go ahead and continue on to kind of show you turn 12 and how much different it is once we get to that point. Unfortunately, this is like kind of a null and void run now because I need her. She's my main DPS, but whatever. It is what it is. Not every run is... Oh my god. See, and now Haruhime died. So she must have gotten critical in penetration. I wasn't looking. So this is kind of a bad example of a run. In fact, let me go ahead and jump back in here to a more successful run. So we're back here on turn 8, and I actually had a little bit more successful run. Winnie died on turn 4, which is kind of my intended goal. Sorry. After reading the light novels, watching the series, I feel horrible about that situation every single time, but it's kind of what we need in order to have a successful run. Now, perfect. Everybody guarded. We are good to go there. Now, guard is a big factor in this. Guard and decreasing that penetration rate are so very important in my run. To be fair, though, that's why sometimes my runs aren't as successful. This is run number 5 now for me tonight. And I've gotten one good run out, and then this is kind of, well, we'll see what happens when we get to turn 12. But as I continue on, like I said, I've got my skill flow set. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. Turn 12 is where things get really, really, really scary. And, you know, will I survive turn 12? I don't know. It's literally a crapshoot every single time. Every single time. Now, you will notice I'm kind of like ripping through this with it at a phenomenal rate. And there's a good reason for that. I've got my skill flow set up, and skill flow literally is going to make sure that these... basically all the little attacks you see down here on every unit are just automatically queued up. I'm going to talk about this at the end of the video, but it's absolutely important and really helps, like, so you don't make simple mistakes, basically. But it's not always the greatest guideline. As you saw when that first run, Winnie didn't die in turn 4 like expected. She died in turn 5. And so I had to kind of adjust everything accordingly. It just didn't work out. This is a rare situation, to be honest, but it just didn't work out. Now, normally, and I will say normally, on turn 12, you want somebody to remove that magic buff that Reveria just did. That little twirl attack she just did, she's now got herself a magic buff. And it's a 30% magic buff. It's not phenomenal, it's not huge, but most of the time, you're not going to want to sit here and gamble on, can we survive? The answer is, if you're asking, can we survive? Probably not, to be honest with you. Probably not. So, the other thing I happen to notice here is Haruhime did not do her essay on turn 9 like I expected. So my skill flow is messed up. So I'm going to have to modify that. We'll do that in a moment. But let's see here. With all my debuffs and everything in play, will we survive turn 12? Don't know, honestly. Literally, this is the make it or break it for my team. Now, if you've removed her magic buff here, it's a no-brainer. You're going to survive. It's going to be great. Oh, Argo died. It's okay. It's okay. It is going to cost me some damage, but realistically, it's not the end of the world. And honestly, Haruhime should have done her essay earlier, but the major downside to this, and the thing that really sucks about that, is now I'm not going to get my final essay off. I would love to get an essay here with Leafia, and then an essay in turn 15, and that means it's going to cost me so insanely much damage, because Leafia's hit here, 3.56 mil, granted as a double attack, but she could still do that as solo if she really wanted to. good RNG will yield some great stuff out of her. We are probably not going to get her last essay, and that is going to cost me huge in this run. You'll see the numbers are not going to be a ghost of what I would normally produce. Look how close I am. So when I say if you're not running high enough difficulty, you're not in danger of this. But to be honest, because I've got all weekend to do this, I'm doing this on Friday or on Monday night. If I really wanted to, it's 10 more Iris. I can rerun this again. I'm not going to. I'm going to save the rest of these runs for tomorrow when everything refreshes and I get 5 more. And we can do some on stream as well. But you need to be taking some risks, honestly. There should be a massive risk assessment as you're going in here. And now, if everybody was dying there on the regular, that would clearly tell me my difficulty is too high. But being that I know he could survive that, I know people have survived that before. Look at that. Actually, 615. I'm not mad about that. I thought we'd get a lot less than that. It was about 100 million less than my normal. But if you look here, difficulty level is 6. I am at 750%. Basically 750% of whatever my score was. So basic score, you get what you get. Turn, you get what you get. Basically, the higher the turn, the better it is. Let's go to score details. So tells you up there total damage. I did, was it 36 million? Something like that. A lot. I did a ton of damage. Okay. Turn, battle result. So 15 out of 15. Because I got there, it basically doubles my score. So I got 72 million going into this. And times 750% times 7.5, it yields a 615 million damage score. So if I was running this at difficulty 1, that might be like 100% or something like that. It is really, really, as I said, it's plus 7 times 7.5. No, it's actually times 8.5. But neither here nor there. The higher the difficulty, the better the number. The more turns you go through, the better the number. It's just simple math. So if you are running it at level 5 and you're dying each and every time, but you're running it at level 3 and you're laughing at it, you need to be running it at level 4. It's that simple. Don't be afraid to use all 5 runs. Don't spend Iris if you can help it, because the goal here is to actually get some phenomenal Iris rewards, but you need to do a little risk assessment. Now, finally, let's talk about skill flow. And I'm going to do a quick modification of Haruhime's skill flow because, simply put, I want her to SA on turn 10 and Sheikah on turn 9. There we go. And I want her to do her third skill all the way to the end. So, basically, how does this work? Well, the goal here is for Haruhime to come in on turn 5. And you'll see that up to turn 4, I've really got nothing set. That is set to a base attack. If she does come in on turn 2, 3, 4, can happen if Winnie gets really unlucky and just gets hammered down on. She can die turn 2. I've seen it happen. It sucks. It's no fun. That means Haruhime is going to come in and do nothing. She's basically going to come in and do a base attack. Now, so basically the top rung there, though, just blank one, that is a base attack. Number 1 is obviously skill 1. So she never does her skill 1 because we already have that debuff and I don't need it. So when she drops into the game, it's turn 5, she's going to do skill 2. It is an MP heal, but the biggest thing is the counter rate and penetration rate buff. Okay, and you'll see she does skill 2 twice throughout the event, and that's basically just to keep up her MP at that point. So first one is to get the counter rate and penetration rate buff. The second time it happens on turn 9 is basically to do an MP heal so she has enough MP to get to the end of the match. Every other time she's doing skill 3, which is basically the heal and the status buff and debuff replication. So number 1 is skill 1. number 2 is skill 2, number 3 is skill 3. It's pretty straightforward. Now, if I went to apply the skill flow from this battle, I click that, it's actually going to do exactly what it did during battle, but I don't like that. I don't want that. I really want to do a modification here. So on turn 9, I'm going to have her do turn 2. On turn 10, I'm going to have her do an SA, and I'm going to change 13's SA to basically a skill 3 attack. So, a little save edited skill flow button here. Boom! Override skill flows, and now when I go back in next time, I can actually auto run it. It should do exactly what I want her to do. But as I said before, I don't recommend auto running it. I do recommend just, babysitting it a little bit, because in my situation where I kind of have a unit that I am sacrificing after doing an SA, she's designed to die in turn 4, but doesn't always mean it's going to happen. So you always want to be at least vigilant and watching over. So let's go look at Gareth's. So with Gareth, his skill 1, mid-thunder physical attack, thunder resist, down 40%, and self-thunder attack damage, plus 90%. All right, so that is predominantly a buff, but it does have debuff properties. But because it is predominantly buff, we're going to need to do that on turns 1, 5, and 9. So turns 1, 5, and 9, we have her set, or we have him set to skill 1. Now, skill 2, strength and magic down 40%. Remember, we said we already had that with Haruhime, so we don't need Haruhime's skill 1. We're doing that with Garrus, and we're doing that on turn 2, and because we have our debuff for application, it's going to stay for throughout the match. I don't really have to redo it, but if you notice here, allies 25% HP regen. I actually want that before every big attack. So basically, before the SA in turn 8, I'm doing skill 2 on turn 7 to get us through that. Seems pretty straightforward. I could do it on turn 8. I find turn 7 is a little more effective for me, just because it gives me 2 turns to make sure that everybody is kind of at full health. So turn 7 and turn 11, I do skill 2. Turns 1, 5, and 9, I do skill 1. Everything else is skill 3. And it kind of seems to work. It's a good skill flow. It does its job. So he's going to do all of that, and then only SA on turn 6, because 1, his SA isn't very powerful. His skill 3 is actually more powerful than his SA. 2, it's that big debuff. The earlier we can get it off, the better. So it's really all about, this is going to set it up, like I said at the beginning of the video, where you could do an auto run. I don't recommend it, but you could in theory. So skill flow is very, very, very important. That's pretty much almost everything you need to know to be effective at this event. Who actually beat me? Oh, okay. All right, I see you. I see you, dog. I'm gonna have to set a new score now. Somebody actually usurped me. So that is literally everything you need to know about Record Buster. While this is talking about this specific one, every single Record Buster, you're going to go through this list. What element is it? Is it physical or magic? What ailment are they using? What difficulty do I need to attack at? You're going to base that on how good your units are. If you have a fully MLB team like I've got, all their weapons and all their armors are ascended, and you feel really confident, and you're attacking it, difficulty 3, that's probably why you're not getting the score you want. Just saying. Does the enemy remove buffs or debuffs? Remember, what is their effect on SA? With the case of Reveria, she's always going to remove buffs. With the case of Rivas, she's always going to remove debuffs. And you can basically, if you want to go to the guides on either one of the Discords will cover each one of those turns and what they do in each turn in grave detail. Can you remove the enemy's buff? So in other words, if I had on my team someone that removed the magic buff and I could fit them on my team, you probably should, then I would have them remove the magic buff on turns 4, 8, and 12, just to make sure that we have a little buffer and then we can survive the SAs. You can kind of see here, we're getting to the stage of the game where our defensive buffs are so great we might not need it. Most people are going to use it. And finally, skill flow. Yes, skill flow is vitally, vitally, vitally important. So make sure you're taking advantage of all that. I believe that's everything we really need to know about every single Record Buster. And of course, always check the news to determine what ailment they're using. And don't be afraid to do, a dry run on Wednesday when the event drops, just to figure out everything you need and take notes. It's the biggest thing, guys. So that's Record Buster Deep Dive. I know it's a long video. Let me know what you guys thought in the comments section. Like, comment, and share. I'll be back with you guys here with more DanMachi. We got the news coming up here in just a little bit.